One of the things that has been in the news and quite prevalent in this last week have been restrictions on entering into certain places. Who can go in, under what circumstances they can go in. And it reminds me of the restriction that is in just about every public retail and eating establishment that we often don't even think about, and that of course is the no shirt, no shoes, no service sign. I don't know whoever came up with that, but it's nice and snappy, it's easy to remember, and we all know it. This guy had something more interesting to add to his sign. Canadian street slang is an interesting one. I found that was funny. No horses, yes, even if they're wearing shirts and shoes. I don't know where this is. No unicycles, I think we can all get on board with that. No invading Mongol hordes, yes, even if they aren't on horses. That sort of thing. So he tried to make it humorous for his customers, and you can read the rest of them if you want. Obviously, this is on our minds because of the face mask issue and the troubles that have arisen from that. But it dovetails very well with our text this morning from 1 Corinthians 15, 44 to 50, because Paul is here talking about entrance into heaven and the restrictions that there will be, or the restriction, it's singular. So let's take a look at the text and see what that is. It begins with this. If there is a natural body, there is also a spiritual body. So it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being, the last Adam, a life-giving spirit. If you remember last week, we were contrasting our current bodies and our future resurrected ones, what the difference would be, and Paul highlighted 4 areas of change. That our perishable bodies will become imperishable, that our dishonored bodies will become glorious, that our weak bodies will become powerful, and that our natural ones will become spiritual. And here he's continuing with that last one, contrasting natural to spiritual. What we have now in our humanity in Adam is the natural, and what we will attain in the future with Jesus, the God-man, is the spiritual. He makes one important distinction here. Adam received life from God. God gave life to him. Jesus gives life to those who trust in him. So the one who gives life is superior to the one who receives it. That seems fairly easy to understand. Let's continue. 46 says this, the spiritual did not come first, but the natural, and after that the spiritual. The first man was of the dust of the earth, the second man is of heaven. As was the earthly man, so are those who are of the earth. And as is the heavenly man, so also are those who are of heaven. So we know that going from our natural to our spiritual is a progression. It's moving forward. We saw those 4 areas where it will obviously be a big improvement. Notice that Adam was made from the created universe. Remember, the book of Genesis says that God formed Adam from the dust of the earth. He came from that which was created. Jesus is different because of the incarnation, the virgin birth. There, the gospel tells us that the power of the Most High overshadowed Mary, and Jesus came in the flesh. His humanity was combined with divinity directly from heaven. And so there's yet another distinction between the physical, the natural, and the spiritual represented by Jesus. All human beings have followed Adam's pattern. We are all natural. We are all earthly. That is what we are. But all Christ followers, all those who will follow after his pattern, will receive that image and will be a spiritual body. And we talked about that quite a bit last week, that will be connected to, but superior to, our current existence. And so Paul is continuing with those thoughts, and here's where we're going to see our focus this morning on these next 2 sections. Just as we have borne the image of the earthly man, so shall we bear the image of the heavenly man. And this is where I'm going to stop for a moment and share a little personal part. My daughter, Clara, has blue eyes. Don't you, Clara? You have blue eyes. Who also has blue eyes? Your mom. if you didn't hear her say my mom. She has made it known to me and to others that she doesn't have dad's eyes. She has mom's eyes. Mom and Clara have blue eyes. Daddy does not. I'm well aware of the fact that she inherited mom's eye color. That's okay. I can live with it. It's Mother's Day. I'll let you have that one. She bears her mother's image more than mine in that respect, at least. It also reminded me that on a few occasions when looking at baby photos of either my older brother or me that did not get labeled. Any of you have this issue? Pictures from the 60s or 70s that you did not label when they were taken or who was in them, and you look at them now and say, I have no idea. I don't know who this is. I don't know why we took this picture. I don't know when we took this picture, and you realize you should have written in ink on the back of that a long time ago. Well, on some of those baby pictures, my own mother can't tell if they're Brian or me. I'll give her a hint. They're my brother. He's the firstborn. There's always more pictures of the firstborn. Everybody knows that. You take 1,000 pictures of the firstborn. The second kid, you take 3 or 4 and say, yeah, we've done this. That's the way parenting goes. I'm just kidding. I have no idea. I don't know which one they are. It's a baby picture. I was there, but I'm not sure. We apparently resemble each other enough, at least we did as babies. We look a little bit different now. I don't have a chin dimple thing, for one thing, that she can't tell. We inherit that image. Some of you look like your parents. Some of you look like a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle, someone that you really resemble, and we understand that. Well, in our natural, fallen, ostracized from God state, we all resemble each other. We all resemble Adam, and every person who has lived ever since, every generation, all the way through, we resemble each other. We have those same qualities, that same rebellious nature, that same fallen heart and mind that is corrupted by sin. That's who we are. But in our transformed state, when we're born again, redeemed, when we become children of God, we evidently will look like Jesus. And that is an interesting question. We will look like Jesus. So I ask the question, who do we resemble right now? If in our past we were earthly and resembled Adam, and in our future we will be heavenly and resemble Jesus, who do we look like now when people see us? We look more like Adam or more like Jesus? Do people have to wish there was something written on the back of the photo so they can tell which one you resemble? Well, in order to answer that question, we need to ask the question, what does Jesus look like? And that issue from biblical archaeology was talking about the question of whether or not Jesus looks like he does in the art. Because the art of Jesus, right, the movie portrayals, the art of Christian art, it mostly portrays Jesus with a certain look. And they were saying, well, archaeologically speaking, we think he probably looked more like this. We obviously don't know because we don't have any pictures, any contemporaneous pictures of Jesus, any portraits that were done. But we do have something very important. We have the Gospels. And the Gospels can best be understood as portraits of Jesus. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, as they sat to collect the information and put together their writings about Jesus, were trying to paint a picture of him with words. They were highlighting things that painted their picture. Matthew had an idea, and Luke had an idea, and they were all trying to figure out what part of the story do I want to emphasize? What order do I want to tell the story in? What are the things I want to repeat? What are the things I want to emphasize? Because that's the story of the picture of Jesus that they wanted you to see. And so, on a somewhat random way, I grabbed some of the stories of Jesus to give us an illustration of what Jesus looks like. And no, we're not talking about the beard. We're not talking about any of the things in his physical appearance. We're talking about the things that he did and the picture they paint for us, because this is what we want to look like. Well, one of the ones that is most famous and jumps out is, of course, Jesus saying, "Let the children come to me." When his disciples try to keep the children away, and Jesus says, no, these are the right ones. That's an interesting story. That tells us something about Jesus. On numerous occasions, Jesus touches a leper. Someone with an infectious disease comes to him and he touches them and heals them in a way that others would have been afraid to do. On other occasions, Jesus eats with tax collectors and quote-unquote sinners, prostitutes, and all sorts of disreputable people. Jesus says, I'll go eat dinner with you. A somewhat different emphasis in Jesus and who he was and what he was like was when he drove the moneylenders out of the temple. When he made a whip and chased them out of there because he was concealed with the zoom for the house of the Lord. And yet on another occasion, we see Jesus at the tomb of Lazarus, the tomb of his friend, with Mary and Martha, also his friends, and everyone is weeping. And even though Jesus knows that in mere moments, Lazarus will come forth from that tomb alive once more, he can't get past the moment without weeping. That tells us something. At the beginning of his passion, Jesus washes his disciples' feet. There's a picture. That's telling us something about Jesus. In the garden, as he wrestles in prayer with what is about to happen. When he's at the cross and they begin to crucify him, and he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. After the resurrection, when Thomas says, I won't believe unless I see the nail marks in his hands. And Jesus appears to him and says, here, Thomas, touch, see. And then one of the last things we see from Jesus, one of the scenes near the end of his time with us, he says to Peter 3 times, do you love me? Feed my lambs. We see his ability to restore Thomas and Peter. So what is that picture? It's a number of things. It's obviously compassion, an amazing amount of that. It's zeal, that fire. It's commitment to a path and a purpose. It's purity. It's certainly love, all sorts of love in all sorts of circumstances. It's humility, washing the disciples' feet. It's obedience. That's what he was deciding upon, or choosing in the garden. It's self-sacrifice at the cross. It's integrity. It's faith. It's hope. It's all of these qualities that will determine whether or not we look like Jesus. If you don't have any of those qualities, you don't look like him. If instead you have greed and lust and hatred, that doesn't look like Jesus. When people look at you, they still see Adam. They don't see him. So that's important right now, as we are here and now. But it's going to be more important moving forward. Verse 50 is where we'll end. I declare to you, brothers and sisters, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. You might have been wondering, why does it matter what we look like now? Is it such a big deal if people see Jesus now? Well, it will definitely matter what people see, what God sees in this case, when you stand before your Maker. Because if he does not see Jesus, you have a problem. Now, there are numerous restrictions. There's all sorts of restrictions that restrict our movement. That's another thing we've been talking about lately an awful lot, right? I can't go where I want to go. I can't do what I want to do. You know what? Life is full of those restrictions if you stop and think about it. There are numerous things that you cannot go to and be a part of if you don't have a ticket. There are some things that you can't do if you don't have a passport. There are some things that are restricted based on your height, or your age, or your weight, or your gender, or whether or not you're a member of the whatever. And unfortunately, in this world, we also have people restricted based on their race, or their class, or nepotism that's not going their way. Now, sometimes people get around those restrictions. A $20 slipped here gets you past, or sneaking around the fence, or whatever the thing is that gets you in. And some of those restrictions have changed over time. Voting rights are one of the most obvious things. Originally, voting rights were only for white men that had property. And then they took the property restriction out. And then, of course, after a little thing called the Civil War, they took out the race restriction. And then last but not least, they decided, okay, women can vote too. That's changed over time on what the restriction is on that right, on that ability. So we deal with these all the time. But there is one restriction, there is one entrance check that is far more important and will be more strictly enforced than any of them. And that is, of course, entrance into the kingdom of heaven. There has always been and always will be a gate, as it were, at heaven that only allows those who look like Jesus to enter. Without that, no one is getting in. Doesn't matter who they are or what they were or any of it. You see, as we were apart from God, in that natural state of rebellion against God, we had zero chance of admittance into heaven. There was absolutely nothing we could do that would have changed our status. We were rejected. Because heaven, the kingdom of God, is where God dwells. And in that place, it must be 100% holy, 100% righteous. There can be no trace, no hint of sin, no immorality, no decay, no death can exist there. None of the things which categorize humanity in our natural state may get into heaven. So you ask yourself, how do we get past heaven's bouncer? For one reason or another, pop culture has, or Christian pop culture, has made Peter the bouncer in heaven. There's been numerous paintings and cartoons that show Peter there, all sorts of dream sequences on sitcoms and whatnot with Peter checking people at the gate. It doesn't really work that way, but there is, however, something to get past. And the how is actually quite simple. You see, all we need to do is exchange our image for his. And we do that simply by putting our trust, our hope, our faith in Jesus. In other words, we become a Christian. You might not understand. What does it mean to become a Christian? That's exactly what it means. You put your hope, your trust, your faith, you put your future in Jesus' hands. And then you follow him as a disciple. You follow him as someone who wants to be like him, who wants to imitate him. I remember the commercials from back in the day. I want to be like Mike, right? Very popular commercial series about being like Michael Jordan. And you know what? None of us are anything like Michael Jordan. Not in any of those things. Other than wearing Nike shoes or drinking Gatorade, we've got no chance. But we can absolutely be like Jesus Christ if we put our trust in him. How do we do that? What does that actually mean? I say that, but maybe you don't understand what that actually means. What does that mean? It's very simple. All a person needs to do is repent from sin. In other words, turn away from those selfish, immoral choices that we were making in life, from those habits. Ask God to forgive us for the ones that we've already committed, for the things which we've already done, the mistakes which we have made, our failures. Because Jesus died on the cross and was raised from the dead for us, we can find that forgiveness. We can start living by faith. And I say to you this morning that Paul is telling us, as does the Gospels, as does the rest of the New Testament, that there is no other way to heaven. Jesus himself made it quite clear in the Gospel of John when he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to no one comes to the Father but by me. Very simple, very direct, very serious. So we don't have our normal congregation here. We're primarily worshiping on Facebook Live this morning, so I have absolutely no idea who might be listening, who might be watching this now or in the future. So I want to say to you, if that is not something that you have ever done, if you have not put your faith in Jesus Christ, if you have not trusted in him, if you are still on your own, you can do that. It's very simple. You can do it with a prayer. Doesn't have to be out loud, doesn't have to be specific words. It's a change of heart, it's a change of direction. You can do that. If you have not, you need to. Because when you stand before God, if you do not look like Jesus, you will not get into heaven. If you do look like him, you're already in. Two things for us. Two things only to remember this morning. Number one, heaven is only for those who look like Jesus. It has nothing to do with anything other than having his image, his likeness, being like him. And the only way we can possibly ever get anywhere near that, and we need 100% of it, is by grace through faith in him. If we have that, we will get to see Jesus face to face, as our song that we sang earlier said this morning. Thank you.